Hey, Angie Nelson here from theworkathomelife.com. Today I am going to be talking about something that comes up frequently in my community, and that is how to create a great work-at-home resume. Many people are really surprised to find out that your resume when looking for remote work tends to differ a little bit than what you are used to with your typical traditional on-site 9-to-5 job. There are some things that you need to do a little tweaking in order to make your resume noticeable, especially considering that this application process is so different than the traditional jobs as well. In many cases, you're never going to meet with your potential employer or an interviewer in person. So your resume is really what's going to make you stand out. It is going to be your first and sometimes your last impression. So it is important that you put in some time. And today I'm going to be sharing some great tips with you in order to make yours stand out. Now please stay till the end of the video to find out how you can learn more about some of the great resources and the tips that I'm sharing today. Now, one thing that people are often glad to find out is that your work-at-home resume often highlights your experience over your education. In many of the online jobs that are available today, a degree isn't always required. Sometimes it is preferred, but in many cases, what they're looking for, what your employer is going to be looking for, are going to be the skills that match the job. And that's why it's so important that your resume does highlight the skills that are applicable to that job. In many cases, recruiters in the online space do recommend that you are tailoring each resume that you send to the job that you're applying for. And that is a great opportunity to make sure that you are listing those skills that the company is looking for and making sure that you're answering the two most important questions that that employer has. And that is, why is this job and why should you be hired? Now, the skills section is obviously going to be the highlight of your resume. It is where you're going to focus the most amount of time and attention, is making sure that your skill set is matching the job description and what the company is looking for. Now, after you've chosen the most applicable skills to that job, you're going to want to back up those skills with job experience, life experience, or specific accomplishments. Now, when it comes to your work history, you'll probably only need to go back 5 or 10 years, depending on how much work experience that you have. If you've worked for several work-at-home companies already, or you've had several freelance gigs at one time, you may want to limit your work experience to just 5 years. And in this section, you will want to kind of do some modifications here as well. Rather than being really general about what you've done at a past employer, get really specific about some of the accomplishments. If you're a freelance writer, a good example of that would be, rather than just saying that you wrote articles for a client, you might want to note that you wrote 60 articles that were published on Forbes for that client. Get really specific about the accomplishments that you have made at these past employers. Now, as I've mentioned several times already, you are going to want to tailor each resume to the job you're applying for. Now, because you do want to do so much tailoring to the job, you may want to consider nixing the fancy templates. Now, I understand that you may think that having, a fancy resume template with bright colors and fancy fonts and text boxes and tables may help you stand out, but it actually may become a point of big frustration to you over time. Because you are going to be modifying it so frequently, some of those things are going to lose some of their formatting over time. And what you're going to be left with is just a big, messy resume. So, because of that, many places now are just recommending that you start out with a blank Word document and start building your resume from there. Leave out all of the fancy formatting and just focus on what's important, and that's your skills, your education, and your experience. Now, there is a company called JobScan that does have a great functional resume template that's available for free, and I'll leave you a link to that in the description below. Many companies are looking for prior work at home experience, which is a big point of frustration for many newcomers because it's a catch-22. How do you get a work at home job if they want work at home experience? It's just a vicious circle there. So you're really going to want to think back to your work history and things that you have done, and try to pull out some of those opportunities where you have worked remotely in the past. I know when I was first applying for my first work at home jobs way back in 2007, one of the things that I did put on my resume every single time was that occasionally I was allowed to take work home. You know, it was overtime work that didn't need to be done on the computer. It was something that we did have available on occasion. And that is something that I made sure that I put on my resume and my application. The reason that they're looking for this prior telecommuting experience is because they want to see that you can be dependable and that you are going to show up when you aren't punching the clock per se, or you don't have a boss standing over you. So having that prior experience is going to let them know that you are dependable and you know what that working relationship entails. Now, there are going to be skills that need to go on any work at home resume. The first one is obviously technical know-how. When you're working at home, you don't have the opportunity to just call up the IT department downstairs and have them come and fix your computer if it's froze up. Those are things that you're going to need to be able to troubleshoot on your own. So those are skills that you're going to want to make sure you include every single time. Writing and communication is also a big one. This is a different work environment, so they need to be able to feel confident that you can relay any problems or concerns that you do have, and that you have great communication skills. Now, decision making is another big one. You don't have the opportunity to just put a customer on hold and run over to your boss's desk to have a question answered all the time. So there are going to be some instances where you're going to have to make decisions on the fly. So that is something that they are going to want to look for, is that you are confident about your ability to make decisions on the fly. And as I mentioned before, they are going to want to make sure that you're reliable and you can manage your time well. You aren't going to have a supervisor there making sure that you're getting your job done. They need to know that they can depend on you to do what you've said you're going to do. Now, something that comes as a surprise to many people that are new to looking for work from home is that it's not a person in most cases that's looking at your resume once you hit that submit button. It's actually going through an applicant tracking system, or ATS. And what this software does is it scans your resume looking for certain words or phrases that employer has punched in, and then giving you a score about how well you match to that individual job. It's only after you've been given that score and you match a certain percentage that your resume may actually be seen by an actual person. So it is really important that you are tailoring your resume. This is where this all comes into play. When you're modifying your resume for each application, you can make sure that the phrases and the skills that you're including do match what that job listing says the company is looking for. Now, a good example of this, just to give you a quick one, would be if you're looking for a virtual assistant job. And let's say that the job description says that they're looking for someone who is knowledgeable in things like Dropbox, Microsoft Office, Google Docs, Evernote, Asana. If you only include on your resume that you're familiar with online tools, you might not be hitting enough of the words within that scanning software to get you move on to the next phase of the application process. You may be fully qualified for the job, but without including those words that they're looking for, you may be passed on before you have an opportunity to get to speak to someone directly. Now, if you want to make sure that you're getting close, or maybe get a feel for how this ATS software works, there is a site called JobScan that will allow you to scan your resume and compare it to a job listing for free. I think they allow you to do free scans per month. One thing I want you to really keep in mind with with JobScan and with any other software that you come across like this is that it should only be used as a guide. I don't want you to be stuffing, phrases into your resume to the point that it makes it incomprehensible to your employer. That's not something that you want to do. Like I said, just use it as a guide, but don't go so far that it becomes apparent that you're only trying to pass some software. You want to make sure that it's still something that's legible and can be read clearly by an actual person. For those of you out there that are familiar with SEO or search engine optimization, it's the same theory there. Use it as a guide, but don't go overboard. Now, there are some frequently asked questions that come up within my community when it comes to resumes. One that comes up an awful lot right now is, I'm afraid of age discrimination. I think that I'm being, passed over for jobs because of my age. And that is certainly a big concern, both online and off. When I was digging through, some research for this video and the accompanying blog post, Monster has on their site that you can avoid including dates for your education. That's something that ages people a lot. Because we're only going back 5 or maybe 10 years of work experience in some cases, it can be really difficult to tell your age from just that work experience. But if you are including the date that you graduated from high school or from college on your resume, that's something that can certainly give an indication of your age. So Monster says on their website, just leave that out. Now the next question is, what font should I use on my resume? The best thing you can do is keep it simple. Keep it clear, legible. Don't try to get too fancy. Georgia, Merriweather, Calibri are some of the most recommended fonts that you use. Stick away from anything that's too cutesy. Now, another question is obviously, what about employment gaps? For many of you that are looking for work from home, you may have gotten out of the workforce because you had a baby or you had little kids at home and you wanted to stay home with them. And now it's come to the time where you really want to get back into the workforce. But your employment gaps are obviously going to come up, regardless of whether you're looking for an online job or a more traditional on-site job. So the first thing that you are going to want to do is really think about the roles that you've held since you've been out of the workforce. Maybe you've done some freelancing. Maybe you've done some volunteering. Maybe you've had some part-time jobs along the way that you can include on your resume. Maybe you've helped out, at your church's vacation Bible school every summer. Those are things that you can include. You can also include things, let's say that you took in kids for babysitting during the school year since you were going to be home anyway. That's a great opportunity that you can put on your resume that's going to show that you are dependable and reliable. Now, there are a couple things that you are going to want to do before you hit that submit button for any resume. The first one is use bullet points. When you're listing out those skills and that employment history, make sure that you're keeping it as simple to read as possible. A lot of these people, once they do get their hands on your resume, they're going to be skimming through them. It should come as no surprise for work-at-home jobs. A lot of these companies report receiving hundreds, if not thousands, of applications for every one job posting that they put up. So you're really going to want to make yours clear and scannable by an actual person. That means including bullet points, and it also means embracing the white space. Don't make it so cluttered that someone, gets overwhelmed just looking at it. Keep it short, simple, concise, and easy to read. The next thing you need to do is proofread, proofread, proofread. A lot of people are passed over for jobs simply because they misspelled a word or they, made some grammar mistakes that would have easily been caught if they would have given it a second look, or maybe even had a friend or a relative give it a look as well. Proofreading is so important in your online job search. Now, as I mentioned several times already in this video, tailor every resume to the job. This is going to make sure that you're including those important keywords that are used in the job description. And it's also going to make sure that you're including the most relevant skills and experience to that particular job. The next thing that I want you to do is make sure that you are reading the directions. Because these companies do receive so many resumes and applications for every job, many of them will put little disqualifiers in the job listing. That may be, a certain word that you need to include in your email subject line. Or maybe it's a certain phrase they want you to include, first thing on your resume. These are all things that they do in order to get rid of a big chunk of those applicants right off the bat, so they can just focus on the people that they know are going to follow attention and be really detail oriented. So make sure that you are reading those job descriptions and reading them again. Now, the last thing I want you to do is to make sure that you have a professional looking email address. You don't want anything that's, hotmama@hotmail.com, anything that's a little too cutesy or too risque in some cases. Get rid of your high school email address and, upgrade to something more professional looking when it comes to your job search. And there's going to be additional benefits to this as well. Not only are you going to look more professional if, say, you're using an email address that's your first and last name, but you are also going to have an email address that's dedicated solely to your job search. This will help ensure that you're not skipping over, any requests or any inquiries for additional information. If you've been using the same email address since high school, you likely are getting a ton of junk there anyway. So go to Gmail, set yourself up a new free email address to use just for your job search. Now, those are just a few quick tips for you today. I have a huge blog post over on the Work at Home Wife that has some mega tips for your work at home resume. I'm going to leave you a link to that in the description below, along with some additional resources that we talked about in this video. And I want you to leave me any questions that you have in the comments. If there's some follow-up questions that you have, feel free to ask them below. Now, if you like today's video, please give it a like and a share, and make sure you're subscribed to my channel so you'll get notification of the next video. Until then, I wish you best of luck in your work at home job search.